Greetings, Rebel fans. My name is Jason Kelly. This is the Let's Run podcast. I want to welcome you all to the show today. For the third time this season, I am honored and just grateful to be talking to Bronco Bleymaier, Boise State, one of the biggest content creators for the Broncos. We've had a lot of long discussions this year, and we might as well make take advantage of it while we can, because we're not going to be conference mates for much longer, pretty sadly. So I know I wish, my position. I wish we were going with you guys to the Pac-12. I wish that our school had figured out its finances a little better and figured out a way to do it, but it is what it is. You got to take advantage of it, enjoy it while you can. Thanks so much for jumping on, man. Big week. The rankings came out earlier today. Boise State, even if they lose, they're in, right? Because SMU loses, they're in the playoff. How you feeling, man? I'm just kidding.
That the ACC was the ACC head. He came out and he was like, man, conference championship shouldn't matter. If you lose, you should still be in. Kind of a ridiculous statement. But no, it's great to be on, man. I've loved the conversations that we've had. When we came and played at your place, you came on my channel, and now that you're coming to play at our place, I'm coming on yours. So we kind of got our streams mixed up there a little bit. But this is going to be a great conversation. I've loved our previous two discussions. And I'm excited to preview this. Like you said, Bronco Bleymaier, Boise State-focused YouTube channel. If you're interested in that, make sure you check it out. But it's not just Boise State. I also talk about Mountain West, Pac-12, conference realignment, college football news in general, any of that stuff. And while you guys are here, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that like and subscribe from Jason, and make sure that you pin his browser as well for the Let's Run podcast as well.
Yeah, thanks for that, man. Appreciate it. Really, just awesome times right now. It's a great time to be a Rebel fan. It's kind of an unreal time to be a Rebel fan right now. I saw a funny tweet earlier today that I reposted that said that UNLV has had one winning season from 2000 to 2022. And Alabama has 6 national championships from 2000 to 2022, and UNLV controls its own destiny to the college football playoff, and Alabama does not.
How awesome is that, man? How awesome is the new structure? That you have all these teams complaining about whether or not they deserve to be in. The Big 12 is complaining about their seeding, and the ACC is complaining about whether they should have 2 teams or not. But the fact that we even have that discussion right now, because if it was last season, it would be 2 SEC teams at the top of the rankings. You have 2. You probably have like 2 SEC teams in, and then Oregon, or maybe Notre Dame, depending on the results of the game, and 2 Big Ten and an SEC. Now you have all of college football, and now we actually get an opportunity to have a show where we talk about either Mountain West program going to the playoffs. How insane is that the Mountain West championship game is now a play-in matchup for the playoffs? What a crazy time to be a college football fan. It's going to be a great discussion.
Yeah, if you think about it, this isn't quite fair because, it's not, but like, this is kind of like and it sucks because we've already played each other too, but this is kind of like the group of 5 playoff game in a sense. Oh. And that's not completely real, but like in our own imagination, we can pretend this is the group of 5 playoff game. Boise State won the previous matchup. They get the honors of hosting it because of that. They get the advantage from that head-to-head win down in Vegas. But it's just great. And, it's going to be sad losing you guys. It's been a fun little, I don't really want to call it back and forth because, we actually haven't won one in the last year, but this will be the third time that our programs have played, like in the last calendar year, which is pretty insane if you think about it, especially considering UNLV and Boise never really matched up very often in the Mountain West before the last couple of years. Divisions, we weren't in the same division. And then obviously UNLV was never competing for a Mountain West championship, so there was never a role there either. And UNLV hasn't traveled to Boise since 2016. This has been a big talking point among the Boise media, and for good reason. That's a great home field. When I was in Boise, I loved going to Boise State Bronco games, and when I lived there, and so it's a great field. And none of our players or coaches have ever played or coached there. Maybe an assistant coach has somewhere down the roster. I'm actually not 100% sure. In fact, I think Brennan Marion has, because he was the OC at Hawaii, and I think they played in Boise one time with him. But regardless, it just goes to show how little experience UNLV has at playing in Boise, and it's kind of crazy. So going back to the game in Vegas, We did our long preview show. What kind of surprised you about that game? What did you think was going to happen that did happen? What were your general impressions of that game in Vegas? You go first, and then I'll give you mine from the UNLV perspective.
I think we were both surprised by the results of that game. I think you were predicting a little bit of a closer score than I was. We were both predicting Boise State wins in that one. But that is not the game I expected to play, because you had two very explosive offenses coming down to play each other. Obviously, everything that Ashton Jeanty has done, the potential of the passing game for Boise State as well, somewhat unexplored potential, but it's kind of starting to rise up. And then obviously everything that Malik Williams is against a weakness for Boise State at that point. And still to this point, their secondary, you really expected that to be a high scoring affair. When I was predicting in our preview, 58-37 is what I was saying in that game. And it ended up not only being close, which I was not anticipating, but ended up being a low scoring game, 29-24. I mean, again, these are two of the most dangerous offenses, I think, in the Mountain West. They do statistically have two of the better defenses. However, I just didn't expect that to play out the way it did, and it ended up being a much closer game. So what surprised me in that one, in addition to it being closer, was the effectiveness of stopping the running game by UNLV. Ashton Jeanty was hurt early in that game, ended up playing through a pretty significant injury that has hobbled him throughout the rest of the season. But even despite that, UNLV really was doing a great job of plugging the holes. And it's something that we've seen every other Mountain West team since then has copied that patent of UNLV, especially when it comes to the outside contain. And then the other element that I was personally surprised on, this was a positive, was the ability of Boise State's defense to not shut down, but limit the explosive potential of the UNLV offense, and particularly that dual threat capability of Hodge. He did have a couple of long breakout runs. I think it was like the first drive or something. He had like a 40-plus yard scramble, something like that. And he ended the game with over 100 yards rushing, one of his, I think, 400-yard rushing games this season, 3 or 4. But however, I mean, overall, UNLV was not the dynamic, offensive, explosive program that we've seen in the previous games that they've had, or even since then in the season. And Boise State did a pretty good job of not allowing themselves to be exposed overall by the deep ball and shutting down the run game. So we will have to see how both of these programs adjust coming in to play each other twice. It's always so tough to play a team twice in a year. Boise State is 2-4 when they have to play a program that they beat in the regular season in the Mountain West Championship game. So we will have to see. There's a lot of tape for both these teams to analyze, and I think both programs want to do things better than they did the last time. Boise State in the running game with Ashton Jeanty. Malik Williams just overall in his performance, and even in the secondary performance, you got some guys coming back from UNLV that I think will want to make a massive impact. It's going to be a very interesting game.
Yeah, from the UNLV side of that game, I was really disappointed in Hodge. You know, like I look back at his performance in that game, and obviously, you know, that credits to the Boise defense. I mean, they did a great job against him, but some of the decision making from Hodge I thought was pretty bizarre. He was holding on to the ball way too long when he had chances to throw it away. That end of, I mean, like, you want to talk about a momentum killer. He took a sack that took us out of field goal range, and I just don't know what we were doing at the end of that first half. Like, he took a sack that took us out of field goal range. We tried to kick a 60-yard field goal, no chance. Boise State gets an easy score because of that. I mean, we had a chance to go up 17 to 3, and all of a sudden we're down 14-10. And really, you can point a lot of that blame directly at Hodge Williams. If you would have told me before the game that Maddox Matson would have not just like outplayed him, but thoroughly outplayed him, I would have been surprised by that. And I was surprised by that because he did. You know, Ashton Jeanty is kind of a given. Even that 125-yard performance, I think that performance is as impressive as any, especially considering the injury that he had. Like, if I was showing highlight reel plays, there's a few plays from that UNLV game from Ashton Jeanty that I think really exemplify him as a player. I thought that was an unbelievable performance from Jeanty, regardless of how many yards we kept him per carry. He was just as crazy as ever in that game. But the interception, you know, Malik Williams playing as bad as he did in that game kind of blew me away, because if you go back and watch the Syracuse and the Fresno game, and basically every game that he had before then, he was awesome. And so that would be the single biggest thing that surprised me. And again, like you were talking about, going back and forth between two teams, Boise State's going to have some players back. UNLV is going to have some players back. I think that it's difficult to, like, you know, throw hypotheticals in there. I was watching Bronco News Nation today with BJ, because I generally tend to just watch everything they do, just because it's really good stuff. Um, but when you're talking about hypotheticals, it's like, oh, well, Boise State was missing this guy, UNLV was missing this guy. I don't think we really need hypotheticals. We have the final score. Boise State was a better team than UNLV. I think that the closer score probably wasn't quite in. I thought Boise State was at least one full score better than UNLV in that game. And it was more about Boise State kind of controlling the clock. And that surprised me that Boise State was able to shut down the UNLV offense. I didn't know that we'd be able to shut down the UNLV defense. The Boise State offense. I didn't know that we would shut down the Boise State offense in a way, and we didn't really shut it down, but I didn't know that we'd limit it to in the way that we did. And I hope that our offense can put up a better showing. I hope that Hodge can play better in this matchup, because that was really disappointing for me, and it really made me respect Maddox Madsen in a way that I feel like Boise State fans going after him have been way too harsh on him, considering how well he played against UNLV. I mean, Genty was incredible, but you guys don't win that game without that performance from Maddox Madsen.
Yeah, I have become known as the Maddox Madsen hype channel, and I don't think that's necessarily fair. I like to think of myself as the facts and logic channel. So whatever is actually being put out on the field in an actual factual manner, I'm going to support. And the facts back up the fact that Maddox Madsen has had a really strong season this year. Passing yardage percentage, all those things. He's plus 60% completion percentage. He's nearing 3,000 yards passing. He's done great in every single of those elements for Boise State this season. He has 2,556 yards passing, and he has a 60+% completion percentage. All of those are in the top section of the Mountain West this year. And yeah, you're right. He hasn't necessarily been the explosive quarterback of Boise State years past, but when Boise State has needed a drive, when they've had a key conversion, he's been able to do that. And he's also overall been able to avoid the big mistakes, the interceptions, those forced sacks. Now, that is something, of course, that UNLV is definitely going to want to key in on. They've been great forcing interceptions all season long. 16 interceptions so far this season, and having the return of one of their top corners is going to be a big part of that. They're going to try to key in on the ground game. We'll talk about this. So trying to go after Maddox Madsen is going to be a key part of this game. But I agree with you that Maddox Madsen had a great performance. And Hodge Malik Williams, statistically, when you look at his numbers, and again, in trying to console some of the Boise State fans who even after that game, we're not super happy with the secondary performance. I said, look, Hodge Malik Williams had one of his lowest passing games of the entire season. And in the last last 5 games, it is his lowest passing numbers of the season. So Boise State's going to want to try and replicate those numbers. But on the other hand, you've got 2 players that are going to have a huge impact in this game. Ashton Genty, who was injured and limited, 126 yards, lowest of the season. Still a good performance, but definitely not what he wanted. He's going to be coming to this game angry with something to prove. And I think Hodge Malik Williams, you can hear it in the press conferences, the way that he's talking about Boise State. He's bitter. He has something to prove. And so you're going to have 2 players that are going to both try to take this team on their teams on their backs. And we're just going to have to see which one of them has the bigger game. I think that's the team that wins this one.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. And Hodge, I hope he makes better decisions. He was holding onto the ball way too long at that time. I think that comes a little bit from Hodge, like overthinking the game a little bit, kind of, not processing it quickly enough. He's a very analytical guy, despite what some Boise State fans may think about his intelligence with maps and geography. Which, by the way, like, I would love to see a person from New York tell me where in the state of Nevada Carson City is. He's from Georgia, whatever. I mean, I don't think that that's a real story. It's just kind of fun online banter, and have at it. It's all good fun in college football, and everybody, if Hodge wins, I hope we get a picture of him pointing to Boise on a map. And if Boise State wins, I'm sure that there will be lots of jokes about, where Boise is now, or, that kind of thing. I'm sure that there will be some fun, and that's all good and fun. That's the best thing about college football, that kind of friendly, subtly not friendly banter between between fan bases. But I kind of wanted to talk about, like, the home field advantage aspect of Boise State. Obviously, you and I have experienced it. It's absolutely fantastic. I love it. How big of a factor do you think that will play? I know that we had said earlier that a big talking point from the Boise people is that UNLV had no idea what they were going to expect there, or whatever. How big of a factor do you think it's going to play? And then I'll kind of give my thoughts on that as well.
I think it's a massive advantage. I think when you're talking about Boise State, they have one of the most dominant home field advantages in college football since 2003. And I should have written this number here. But since 2003, Boise State's in the top 5 for home field advantages, all top 3. So they're just behind Georgia and Ohio State for win percentage at home. The last 3 years have somewhat impacted that number. We were number 1 last 3 years, not necessarily up to Boise State's standard, but Boise State's returned to that standard. As I said at the beginning of the season, we are back, and Boise State is winning at home like they always do. And it is a tough environment. I mean, when you talk about stadium sizes, it's not the biggest stadium in the country, just under 37,000 fan capacity. I think they do get it up to right around 37,000 with a little bit of creative seating. But, as far as stadium, it's not, going to be like a 60,000 plus stadium. But I've talked to multiple players who played at Boise State, and obviously they're biased, but they all say that they've played in a lot of different environments, and they've talked to a lot of players that have played in a lot of different environments, and they've all told them that one of the toughest places to play is Boise State on the blue. I mean, obviously you got a little bit of the psychological warfare going on there with the blue turf. And then, so that's new, that's different. And then just the fact that Bronco Nation is a very, very passionate fan base. One of the most passionate fan bases in the entire country. They always come, and the home field advantage, the blue is exciting. The blue is a great marketing tool, but at the end of the day, it's Bronco Nation, and they stay loud. They're a very smart fan base. They're quiet when they need to be quiet, and they bring the energy on every single down. And regardless of scoreboard, they typically stay. The majority of them typically stay throughout the entire game, even in tough conditions. So that's going to be hard. Now, there is the element that with the Mountain West Championship game, it's not a neutral site. Obviously, it's a home field. They do try to do some things to not make it an entirely like you're going to play an away game necessarily. So they give a higher percentage of tickets to the traveling team than it would normally be in an away game. Still more to the home team, but give it a little bit higher. Before this video, I was trying to find the exact rules because I know they're out there, but I didn't have access to the Mountain West Championship game rule book. But remembering from last season, there's a couple of things they do, I think, with like rules for the band and when the announcers can say certain things. So they do try to somewhat mute the crowd advantage, but you're not going to mute Bronco Nation. And UNLV was not able to sell their full allotment of tickets for this game. So Bronco Nation is going to be very, very much a presence and a force in this matchup. And so I think that's something that UNLV fans and players are somewhat underestimating. I think they're looking at, hey, that last game was really close. We got some key players back. We've got a better chance to win this game. You're coming to play on the blue. There are very few teams that come and play on the blue. And the ones that do end up eking out a win, it's by very thin margins. I've seen some UNLV predictions of double plus score projections. I could potentially see a loss. You could always lose to anybody. UNLV will be very motivated, but this is going to be a very tough environment. And for a team that hasn't played here, like you said, since 2016, I think they're going to learn a lot about Boise State.
Yeah, like UNLV has had a good year on the road. They have been a good team on the road. Obviously, it depends on where you play. That San Jose game it wasn't really a road game as much as it was like a torrential downpour. I don't know if you saw what was going on that game, but it was like torrential, and UNLV had a crazy, crazy game there. It was nothing to do with being on the road. It was all just about weather. I thought Oregon State was a pretty good environment when we played there. It was sold out. It was, 30, and they've got a pretty passionate fan base. I thought that was a good test. They weren't a good team by any means, but I thought that was at least a good environment. The soccer stadium we played Kansas at was pretty cool because it was very steep, kind of how Boise State's arena is. It's very vertical, which I really like. Utah's Rice Eccles and Utah's like that too. Whereas like BYU's, it feels like you're like 8 miles from the field. Which actually I have a BYU shirt on. I probably should have dressed better for this, but I'm sure I'll get some crap from the burner brigade here. But I think if Boise State wins this game, I would just attribute it to Boise being a better team more than anything. Like I think that's a bigger factor than the home field advantage. I think the reason why Boise State won one of those home games a lot of times was just because they were the better team. And I think for me, home field advantage is generally a little overrated in college football. Boise State wins, it's because Ashton Genty's amazing and Maddox Matson outplays Hodge. And, so I don't mean to downplay it at all, because certainly it is an advantage. But it hasn't really been for UNLV. I think a lot of times when people come play at Allegiant, it's kind of a hype up experience a little bit. You're playing in an NFL stadium. A lot of times it's the first time. And so a lot of times fans travel really well to Allegiant as well. So, I mean, that's a big factor as well. So I don't know that this team relies on, considering pretty much all the losses in the Barry Odom era have come at home, basically all of them, except for the Michigan game, which, you know, we didn't win in the big house. Whoopee. So that's kind of how I feel about it. I mean, I understand that can sound like I'm downplaying it a little bit, which I am. I just don't know that it's going to be the deciding factor. I think if Boise wins, it's not going to be because their crowd is amazing. It's going to be because they're amazing.
Well, I think that's a factor for sure. I mean, obviously, if you're a terrible team and the margins are going to be too wide to be able to be impacted by home field advantage, but when I think you see two programs that are much closer to equal numbers, you think of the 2009 Oregon program that won the Pac-12 that ended up losing on the blue that year when they came and played at Boise State. Some of these other Mountain West schools, when Boise State hasn't been having the best year. I mean, at one point, Boise State played a top 15 Utah State team a few years back on the blue and ended up beating them. And I think that you could look at record-wise and even potentially roster-wise, that Utah State team was a little better than that Boise State team, and we still won that game. So, sorry, I got a little bit of some allergies going on.
You're okay.
Anyhow, so I think that when you're talking about significant gaps, there's going to be a point where one team is just so good that you're not going to be able to overcome it with a home field advantage. But when you're talking about margins, and I think that this UNLV team is the scariest program Boise State has played all year. I really do. I think that when we played Oregon at the beginning of the season, we had nothing to lose. They were still sorting some things out. We were coming off of big momentum, high scoring affair versus Georgia Southern, and we played them and we beat them, if not for 2 field goals. But I mean, like, we were the better team in that matchup. When we played UNLV at their place, I felt more scared in that game about losing a game we ended up winning than I did even in the Oregon game. Like, I thought we were going to win that game until pretty much right there at the end. The UNLV game, until we did that 8-minute drive, I wasn't sure we were going to win that matchup. And UNLV is better now coming to play at Boise State defensively. They've got some key players back. And this is a tough matchup. Boise State's better. I do think that they are better. Ashton Genty by himself is going to widely increase your playing potential. But I think that Boise State defensively matches up pretty well, and they've got some weapons in the passing game. So I think Boise State is better. And when you look at ranking, top 10, number 10 versus number 20, they are technically in that area better as well. But I don't think it's this massive, like 10 to 20 makes it seem like Boise State is so much better than UNLV. I think that they are a lot closer overall. So when you're talking about margins, when you're talking about things that are going to impact victory, inches that end up impacting results, like last week with Oregon State, where we got a first down by like the hair of the football. When you're talking about small things that impact the win, the home field advantage is a big one. And Bronco Nation, and not necessarily implied disrespect to UNLV, but the home field advantage for UNLV is completely different from Boise State. The UNLV does not pack out, Vegas does not pack out Allegiant Stadium to the potential of what Vegas actually offers. And you're right, like there's a third of that crowd is visiting fans. That's not going to be the case when UNLV comes to play Boise State. And with the game being so close already, I think that is going to be a significant impact. If we win, sure, it's because we were the better team. But at the same time, I think the home field advantage is a significant one that I don't think that UNLV is fully appreciating coming into this matchup.
Yeah, and here's one of my favorite members of the Burner Brigade with a good point. Vegas thinks that the two teams have even. The game is on the same home field advantage, around 4 points for Boise. So on a neutral game, I mean, I think that's probably fair. I mean, I don't know that Boise State fans would agree with that, but I think that, you know, Vegas probably does value home field advantage more than I do personally, just as an individual. And I just think that Vegas, like UNLV teams in general, haven't won their big games at home. Like, it's just kind of, and so when you have that experience with home field advantage, you almost kind of become jaded with it a little bit. I think of that Syracuse game, like there's no way that we should have lost that game.
You did it. The refs lost the game, but you know.
Well, I mean, but like we had opportunities to clinch it, you know, like we had dropped interceptions. We had a missed tackle on a 4th down where our safety Catalan, who should be a lot better this game, hopefully, because he was very limited in that Boise game. And so like, I think back to those opportunities and my relationship as a fan with home field advantage is just probably completely different than somebody who grew up with a team that like won 110 home games in a row like Boise State did. And so that might just be a difference of perspective. And I think it's totally fair to see the game analytically and say Boise State having this home field advantage is going to change things, because it definitely could. But I kind of wanted to go into the specifics of the game real quick. And so what do you think will change with Boise State's game plan different than what they did a month ago. It's a little over a month ago now that we played. It feels like yesterday. What do you think is going to change?
Well, I think that a lot will be the same. I think that's probably going to be the case for both teams. I think UNLV, like I said, they set the blueprint for that successful, at least limiting Boise State and Ashton Genty that every other team has copied since. I think Hawaii did kind of set the foundation a little bit, but then UNLV improved upon it. And I think most teams have been copying UNLV's format there. So I think UNLV will be doing some similar things. I think Boise State will be doing some similar things. They tried to establish the running game with Ashton Genty, which they've done all season long, and then also get the play action pass involved for Maddox Madsen. However, I think there are going to be a couple of elements that are different in this game. I think that for Boise State, when you're talking about offensively, I think that they're going to be involving more screens. I think they're going to be more creative on the offense. I think we've seen hints at it throughout the season. The back end of the season, Boise State has been experimenting. It hasn't become their offensive MO, but they have experimented with the option game. They've thrown that in a couple of times, and it's worked pretty much every time they've done it. Whether that's Maddox Madsen pitching it out to Ashton Genty or keeping it himself, like we saw at the end of the Oregon Stadium. We've seen Boise State getting the screen game involved a lot on the back half, a lot of tight end underneath, tunnel screens. We've even seen some wide receivers created. We really haven't seen it all this year. So one to Prince Strong at the end of the last game versus Oregon State, or at some point in that game. And I think that the other element is Boise State's going to emphasize the deep ball. I really do think that they're going to emphasize the deep ball. When you're talking about vulnerabilities for UNLV, not that the deep ball is necessarily like they're unable to defend it, but defensively, UNLV is one of the best in the country at stopping the run. And we saw that last time these teams played. But they are vulnerable versus the pass. I mean, over 244.2 yards, so 244.2 yards allowed per game in the pass. That is, if there is an element of weakness. Now, they're great at the turnovers, but if there's a point that they're not as strong at, that's the point. And I think that Boise State has been trying to emphasize getting the passing game involved, and we've seen them attempting to exploit the deep ball. Now, there's been some misconnection issues, whether it's overthrows or drops, a lot of drops last week versus Oregon State on those deep passes. Kemper made up for it, but he did have a couple of deep balls.
I'm just going to get the lights back on.
Go ahead, I'll keep talking. So I think those are the elements that you're going to see. I think Boise State's going to be more creative. I think they've been holding back a little bit offensively. I think they're saving some things for this game and the playoff and experimenting with some things. And you're going to see, I think, Dirk Cutter put his entire resume on display versus UNLV. And I think you're going to see a very different offensive performance Boise State, in addition to just Ashton Genty, I think, is going to go off in a way he didn't for the first game. He's a lot more motivated, a lot healthier now. It's his birthday this week. It's early on in this week. It was his birthday, and that's always a good motivator for anybody. So I think that those are the differences. Defensively, I think Boise State does the same thing that they did last time, or attempts to do the same thing that they did last time. I do expect UNLV to be better than they were. But I think that Boise State defensively will try to do the same thing they did last time, put a lot of pressure on Malik Williams, force him to attempt to beat you with his arm, and put a spy on and try to stop him from running all over you, because when he runs on you, that's when they win. So I think those are the two elements that Boise State's going to try and do. Pretty much the same defensively, but I think you'll see a different offensive game plan when they take on the Rebels this week compared to what we saw in Vegas and what we've seen the back end of the season.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I hope they, this is something that I kind of thought. So before we, and again, UNR hater, love this guy, GOAT. No more hiding plays. Everything's going to be on the table. Brennan Marion will probably have his full go whatever. There won't be anything left in his back pocket. Totally. But something that I was wondering about, and I was wondering your perspective on this. It's something that I said in my preview before our previous matchup in October. I thought that last year's Boise team was better than this year's Boise team. Now, obviously, maybe and I'm not talking about Ashton Genty specifically. I think Ashton Genty is a better player this year than he was last year. There were some injury issues with Ashton last year. I remember there were nagging injuries, nothing major, obviously, but I thought Taylor Green was a better quarterback for this. And was a better quarterback for the system. And I actually don't think I believe that anymore. I think that game in Vegas really kind of changed my mind on that. But I don't know that I think Cutter's better than Hamden was. I really liked him. The way that Hamden called that game in Vegas, the Mountain West Championship game last year, I thought was a marvelous game. It was perfectly planned, perfectly executed. And so I'm wondering if you think that there could be a Hamden-like explosion from Cutter this week. And I guess I just don't understand why Cutter wasn't calling things differently in Wyoming, and if that was just on Madsen, because you say holding things back, but they were down in that game for a lot of the game. And Wyoming, I think, is a tougher opponent later in the season, as Washington State learned. Obviously, I don't think that was, people point at the beginning of the season results for Wyoming and say, oh, they were terrible, and why did Boise be in a close game? I think that's unfair. Wyoming's clearly gotten better as the season's gone on. But do you think that there's going to be a Hamden-like explosion for Cutter? Because I really thought that Hamden was better than Cutter. But is that opinion just from afar incorrect? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, there's a couple things to talk about there. First off, in regards to Hamden versus Cutter, it's really hard to say because unfortunately, Andy Avalos didn't really let any of his offensive coordinators be offensive coordinators while he was here. We never got to see the full potential of Tim Plow, who's gone on to do incredible things back now, and he's back down the FCS ranks. I think he just got like head coach of the year or something like that. But we never really got to see the full potential of Tim Plow, and we never got to see the full potential of Bush Hamden until right there towards the end. And at that point, you haven't been able to instill your offensive philosophy in the players, and you've had a whole, all offseason and the entire season of doing something, of calling a play style that's not necessarily what you wanted to run. And so I think we did start to see some of the full potential of Bush Hamden with this offense versus UNLV. It's the offense that I've been calling for all season last year. Using Taylor Green effectively, using him as a running threat, a little bit more of that RPO type of action, very, very much more of the something somewhat similar to what we've seen with Maddox Madsen this year, where they're doing the play action passes and then giving the quarterback the option to run. But what Taylor Green thrived at. So I don't know if it's tough to analyze because we've had a whole season of Dirk Cutter being Dirk Cutter, and we only got like one game of Bush Hamden with completely shackles free, and he's had all the time to prepare his players and really put the offense into the system. So it is tough to analyze who's the better coordinator in that sense. When you talk about limiting the game, I don't think that it's like Dirk Cutter's going into these games and he's saying like, we're not going to use these plays because we're saving them. I don't think that's the mentality. I think it's more of he's looking at what the defenses offer and he's saying we can beat them running this style. It allows us to keep some things on the back burner and we could beat them doing this option, this form of offense. The problem is when you prepare a game plan and you go into a defense and they shut it down, it's tough to then start sprinkling things in and doing things that you haven't prepared for, that the players aren't used to because you haven't been running it all season and you didn't really prepare for it that week. And I'm not coming off of any inside perspective on this. I'm not, calling Dirk Cutter up and saying, hey, what's going on with the game plan? This is just my perspective on why that could be happening. So I think Dirk Cutter is, when you talk about experience, and I think experience is a major factor in building a successful person in any field, he has the most experience of any offensive coordinator in the game right now. Chip Kelly maybe is able to be on that same tier, but those are the only two guys you talk about. Head coaching experience, offensive coordinator experience, years in the game. He has more experience than anybody else. He has the capability, I think, to be the best coordinator in college football. And I think that we've seen some really good play calling from him throughout the year. I think we've also seen some attempts to establish certain systems and to get certain players going with certain offensive play styles. I think what we see, and I think that partially the Heisman campaign has been a factor in the back of the minds. And Ashton Jeanty, he's your best player. You want to use him to his max potential, and you want to reward him for deciding to stick around and try to get him those Heisman numbers. And so I think that's also been a factor, is trying to establish Ashton Jeanty at times, even to the to the discredit of the offensive potential, like versus Oregon State, where you run the ball pretty much like 3 times in a row right there at the goal line, just trying to power it in just so you get him another touchdown because you knew the game was already won, versus running a more creative play, some kind of throw to a tight end on a roll action or something like that you can actually score on. So I think that versus UNLV, the focus is getting to the playoffs. I think that you're going to see a team that has, because of the offensive play style, has some capabilities that haven't been fully exploited that they can now utilize that UNLV may not be ready for. And I think that you see Dirk Cutter on the biggest stage so far this season, on the biggest stage, maybe some of that mentality like, well, what did Bush do last year? I've got to, do better. Maybe that's in play. I mean, coaching is a competitive industry, so maybe that's part of his factor. But whatever the reasons, I think you see him use every ounce of his coaching potential and pulls out all the stops in this game to get Boise State to the playoffs, and to win in a way that isn't just getting by, but establishes him where he thinks he should be in the halls of Boise State offensive coordinators.
Yeah, and certainly I think this is his kind of last dance, right? I mean, you never know. Maybe feels like he's always kind of lingering, probably playing golf somewhere in Idaho. Just like anyway, if I was an offensive coordinator for Boise State, I don't know. I'd always feel like he's looking over my shoulder until he dies. But I mean, he's not quite there yet. But thank you for indulging my question there, because I really think that's an interesting dynamic, and I'm going to be very interested. I don't mean to get too off topic here, but I'm going to be very interested to see Spencer Danielson with his own guy next year. Not that Dirk Cutter wasn't his own guy, but I think that next year is going to be a very important year for him to kind of establish his own, because I feel like Cutter's kind of lingered over the whole program this year, and for good reason. He's kind of a legendary coach there. And so it's going to be very fun to see Spencer Danielson, because he's one of the youngest coaches in college football, kind of grow into his role. And without Genty, and I think Madsen will probably be back next year, if I think so. But that'll be a fun thing. So I guess back to the game a little bit, I'll say what I think UNLV will change. So the biggest thing, again, is they didn't respect Madsen in that game. In the game plan, in the first half, UNLV had done, 2 plays in a row of kind of stopping Genty for actually a loss to kind of open the game. I think maybe he got a yard or 2 on one of them. And then Madsen breaks free on like 3rd and 8 for a 72-yard run. And it was like, that is just a backbreaker. And so I think that Jackson, in fact, I know that Jackson, Woodard, and the linebacking core, they're going to be more, cognizant of what's going on with Madsen's legs. That's going to be an adjustment that's made by the defense. They're going to be watching that more. That would be kind of the biggest defensive thing that I would think would change. They might mix. I mean, like, there's probably minute things like mixing up their blitz packages a little bit. We've seen the Rebels kind of stray away from that, just kind of rush 3, sit back. The reason why our passing yard defense has been so bad this season, a lot of it that was by design. They were just willing to give up the 8-yard pass to kind of try and bend but not break. That was the Scherer defensive strategy for a lot of it. He ended up, but all that kind of piled up in the Syracuse game, for example, and we ended up drowning underneath 8 to 15-yard Cal McCord passes. But I would expect a little bit of different line back blitzes, say maybe a safety blitz every once in a while, something crazy. You're going to see a little bit more variation in the way that the UNLV defense runs coverages. As for the offense, the biggest regret, I think, of that game was Ricky didn't really get the ball a ton in that Boise State matchup. And a lot of that is because of the coverage. I thought they were bracketing him really well. Boise State did an excellent job of covering Ricky. I think that the Boise State's, every single Boise State fan knows you guys have some vulnerabilities in the secondary. And they're vulnerabilities that we didn't really exploit that much. Now, some of that was because Jacob DeJesus was injured in our first matchup. And he's been, in that kind of slot receiver way, a very good downfield threat for us. That kind of creates a little bit of an option away from Ricky every once in a while. So I would expect Jacob, who is way healthier now than he was back then, to be able to open up the passing game a little bit. Kaleo Balangai, our tight end, has been getting a little bit more reps and touches. I would expect the downfield passing game to be a bigger part of the game. Even in the cold, I know that it's kind of tough in the cold downfield passes because of the way the ball comes off your hand and stuff. Luckily, this game will not be sub-Arctic. It'll be cold, don't get me wrong. I'm glad that it's not going to be not that, I in my Boise winter, I don't think it ever got below like 25 or 20. It's a little, it's actually not that bad for winter up there. I mean, it's a lot colder than here, don't get me wrong, but I thought that it was better than like the Salt Lake winter. I thought it was a little nicer. But I would expect those to be the biggest differences. They're going to watch Madsen more. They're going to try and replicate their game plan for Genty, and they're going to try and utilize the deep ball a bit more. I hope that they utilize the screen game a bit more. I've been praying, because Boise State absolutely ate, defensive line absolutely ate against us. It was very frustrating, especially because Hodge was struggling that game and getting rid of the ball and making quick decisions. But that's kind of where I see the UNLV game plan differing. And I feel okay about it. Like, what's your level of confidence going into this game? I understand that you are, Boise State is the rightful favorite. Every person not named Brett McMurphy, who seems to want to burn the city of Boise to the ground. When I saw that he picked UNLV, I don't even think Boise State fans took that as like disrespect of Boise in favor of UNLV. It was more just about hating Boise than anything else. That man has a vendetta. But how are you feeling confidence-wise going into the game? I will ask you to, if you'd like to, you don't have to, but I know you have said your pick already. So if you'd like to give your pick, I will give my pick. I don't think most Rebel fans know what I'm going to say already because I've been saying it for a couple weeks. But how you feeling, man? How you feeling about it overall?
Yeah, overall, I'm feeling pretty good about this game. There's a couple elements there, like you said, Maddox Madsen's leg abilities. I think that we'll try to key in on him a little bit better in that. It's not like UNLV had any game tape there before to know that that Madsen was capable of that. The longest he'd ran was 20 yards in a game. So that was his first 50-plus yard performance in that matchup, and we've seen his legs be a bigger factor. So I actually have it as one of my keys to the game that Max Madsen's legs need to be part of the game plan, and so it's good to see you on the other side of that saying they'll need to shut that down. But I think that opens up a whole new world here for this offensive potential. I think that what Boise State has done in the passing game, overall, a couple of bad games. Wyoming, obviously, Nevada, yes. But overall, Max Madsen has played really, really well in the passing game, especially when teams have sold out to stop the run. And I think UNLV is smart enough to know that the passing game is a threat, that they cannot simply go down and stop Ashton Jeanty. But at the same time, now that you are trying to cover that passing game as well, you're going to open up some opportunities. The running game of Max Madsen, having to be aware of that, is going to open up some opportunities from Ashton Jeanty. The more creative play calling that I'm anticipating is going to open up some opportunities for Ashton Jeanty. And so this is going to be a different game for Ashton Jeanty. And when he gets rolling, the whole team feeds off of that momentum, and it is really, really tough to stop him. I think that as far as the potential of this game, I think that you're right. The last time we played them, we had 6 sacks versus UNLV. However, since that game, we haven't done that. I think the highest we've had is 3 sacks in a game. So coming into that matchup, 6 sacks was not that far from our average. But since that game, teams have found a way to exploit it. I think you will see the screen game involved more. I think you'll see the quick passing game. I think UNLV will try to replicate some of the stuff San Jose State did against us that was so effective in that quick pass. Not that they're necessarily set up in the same way offensively, but I think you'll see more of that element as just as far as getting the ball out quickly and trying to beat that blitz. And so I don't think Boise State's front 7 in this game, they'll have an impact, but I don't think it will be to the same level of an impact as we saw versus UNLV in that first game. I don't think that UNLV is going to find themselves in as many negative yardage type situations that put them behind the chains and impacted Hodges' performance and everybody else's in that game. So I think you will see a little bit more of a competitive one offensively from both teams. However, as far as my confidence in this game, there's a lot of things that are leading me to say a Boise State win right now. I mean, first off, big noon kickoff coming to the Blue. But to my knowledge, first time we've had a game day type of crew come to our stadium since the 2010 game versus Oregon State. That was the last time that we had a game day type of environment. So that is going to get this crowd hyped up. I mean, you think Boise State and Bronco Nation already is dangerous at home. I know you don't necessarily, but the statistics showing that we are dangerous at home, you look at those now, multiply those by, another factor with big noon kickoff coming down and all the hype that's going to bring to this stadium. The two key points that Boise State has been somewhat weak on the last stretch of games in the offensive line, where they've had some injuries, and then also defensively, I think they're going to be better because they're getting some key guys back on the offensive line. I think it's going to be the best offensive line you've seen from Boise State since first half of the season, since Oregon. I think that defensively for Boise State, this is going to be a Boise State defense that doesn't look like the last few weeks, looks closer to kind of the midpoint of the season. I thought between like Hawaii and Nevada, they actually started to fix some things. I think that there's word on the street right now from the kind of press conferences that Tubner might be back, who has been a big role player and his absence has been a big factor in the secondary struggling. Simpson came back last week, one of our stand-up linebacker. And so he was a big role in Boise State's defense, playing much better versus Oregon State. The team that we saw versus Oregon State is not the team that we saw from, Nevada through Wyoming. It was a different program that was fixing some elements. Our special teams has seemed to fix some things for themselves as well. So Boise State's moving in the right direction, trajectory-wise. The passing game is more comfortable than they were in the first half of the season. Jeanty is playing healthier than he was since UNLV. He really looked like he was fresh. The massive brace was off of the left arm. He was no longer wearing the bionicle arm. It was more, I think it was just a compression sleeve. And he still had a fumble, so that arm is not necessarily completely 100%, but it's closer. He was still using it effectively in his stiff arms. And then at the same time, so I was already confident coming into this week that Boise State would win. I'm now a lot more confident because there's been some other elements that I think have changed the dynamic of Boise State just being this clear and away favorite to now coming in with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. The national media narrative, there have been some names. It's not just Brett McMurphy, who, yeah, like I said, like you said, he seemed to has a vendetta. We got to go back and analyze some things. He went on Bronco Nation News, had a great conversation with BJ, and then since then he's hated Boise State. So I don't know what they said in the off screen. That's just a joke, BJ. But Brett Murphy obviously has his own vendetta. But there's some other guys that the spread is closer maybe than we think it should be at home. There are some other pundits that are picking UNLV. Boise State's not necessarily the clear and away heads and tails away favorite in this one. No one's saying they're going to come in and just demolish UNLV at home. And then on top of that, like I said, Genty's birthday, that's a big motivator. Dude just turned 21, which is just incredible considering what he's done at his age so far. I mean, the guy's going to be a monster, a legend in the NFL. And then the last element, which I think was, you said, like, taken out of context, whatever. You don't want to give bulletin board material to a team at home. And Malik Williams' statements, whether he intended them that way or not, were certainly taken the way that we've discussed already by Bronco Nation. And I am assuming also by this team. And to quote him exactly, he was asked about the home field advantage at Boise State. And he said, "I don't know what to expect as far as the crowd at Boise. I've never been there." If he just stopped there, would have been totally fine. I think that would have been that nobody would have saying, "Okay, fine, or whatever." Like, okay, you've never played. But then he said, "I don't even know where it is on the map." And then he laughed a little bit. And again, take that how you want to, but that definitely has put a little bit of a chip on the shoulder here, at least from the crowd. The crowd, you think Bronco Nation is loud before? They are going to make sure that Malik Williams remembers where Boise State is, and they are going to be the loudest you've seen all season. With the stakes and everything already, that's going to add an extra boost. So you look at the Boise State messenger boards, Twitter, Facebook, the crowd is aware. I'd expect to see some signs out there, some maps pointing to Boise State. It's going to be a big environment, and you've got to believe that this team is ready. That there's all the emotion of what happened last season. Like, this is not just a regular game. It's not like we're playing like Hawaii or Fresno State or something like that. Like, teams that have been competitive with us in the past, with like a rival like Fresno State. This is a little bit different. This is the game that, for all essential purposes, won Spencer Danielson the head coaching job. I mean, I know that Jeremiah Dickey, when he came on my channel, he said that decision was already made before. However, that's the game that's seen as like him establishing himself. There was a reason that Boise State performed so well. The players were coming out of the woodworks for their coach, the guy they wanted to lead them. And this is a reminder of that game. There's so many more raw emotions on the line. Boise State players are going to be playing not just for the CFP, not just for a Mountain West Championship game, but for Spencer Danielson. They have been all season, and they're going to want to come out and prove themselves to this fan base, to the country, and to their coach. This is going to be, he cares so much for this program, for his players, and they're going to want to fully reward that. So all the elements coming into this game, if you want to throw out my score prediction now.
Sure, yeah.
So my score prediction for this game is Boise State wins 41-27. I think that this will be a higher scoring affair on both sides. I think that you're going to see a lot more offensive potential. And I think that coming into the third quarter, the second half, it's going to be a one-score game. Boise State probably up by one score. But coming through the midway point in the third, I think that you're going to see Max Matson taking over. I think that whatever Boise State has done in the first half, they've made great adjustments all year defensively. So I think they'll do better stopping UNLV in the second half defensively. I think that you're going to see a Boise State offense that forces UNLV to pick one thing, whether that's going up against the pass or going up against the run, and whatever they pick, the other element will exploit them. My prediction is first half, Boise State's passing game will be very dominant. Second half, Ashton Jeanty will take over, have 100-plus yards rushing, maybe 2 or 3 touchdowns. I think by the fourth quarter, they've been a great fourth-quarter team all year long. You see Boise State take a one-score game and push it into a 2-score win and establish themselves as that 4th or 3rd seed, depending on what happens with the ACC championship game for the playoffs.
Yeah, that was great, man. Appreciate it. That was great coverage, great breakdown on that. I will say my score prediction, although I do it a little differently than you in that I don't generally like to give like exact numbers. I like to give a score range and then a margin, generally just because I like covering my butt as much as possible going into games. As for the Hodge thing, I will say, like, it just, like, sometimes it feels like you guys like are looking for reasons to be disrespected from like completely innocuous and innocent things that people say. Like, I think more like Hodge is making a self-deprecating joke about his own lack of knowledge rather than trying to disrespect anything in a group full of reporters that he knows. And it's like, it's like, you're digging under holes. You're like, is that disrespect? Oh, got to call that out. Is that, oh, there's some disrespect. You go into Twitter every morning, you type in people hating Ashton Genty and loving Travis Hunter. It feels like Boise State fans do that. Now you can certainly point out 1,000 annoying things that UNLV fans do. There is tons of baggage there, but that's how I feel about the Hodge thing. I'm just like, guys, I mean, like, you can use it, but like, I remember when Michael Jordan would just like make up like things in his head. I'm not. Now I know that might be a little inflammatory, but I just wanted to say that my opinion about the Hodge thing. That's what I'll say. And also earlier, I don't mean to denigrate the Boise State home field advantage. If I came off that way as a person who has been to Boise State games, I understand how big of a deal that is. I just think that, if Boise State wins, they already proved they were the better team earlier on in the year. They have another chance to do so. And that's what I'm going to be focused on. I'm in my head a year from now. I'm not going to be saying, oh crap, if we had that game at home, we would have won. That's how I generally tend to approach games. And I understand and know that, my wife, when I worked in Boise and my wife worked in Boise, it's all anybody talks about at work. So I, go ahead. Yeah. If people are going to clip me saying that, like, whatever, man. Like, I remember I did that to BJ last year when he was like, I just, and he ended up being right, obviously. But I remember BJ and maybe it was Mallory. We're like talking before the game and they're like, there's just no way UNLV wins the championship game. And I like clipped that together with our uniform video. So I'm guilty of it too. It's great things in college sports. Go ahead and clip me if you want. As for the game, I will do kind of another preview for Rebel fans, a little bit more in depth, but I will give you kind of my overall thoughts on it. I'm picking UNLV to win the game. I said after the Boise State game, on my podcast, I was like, if we get another chance at them, I'm going to pick them. And that's a great way to do analysis. Come to the conclusion before you actually sit down with paper. But I'm going to stick by it. I think that the teams are closer together, maybe, or close together. Is there a version of the game? Like, I'd say probably the most likely outcome if you simulated the game. There's probably a lot of outcomes where Boise State wins this by a couple of scores or a score and a half, 10 points. There's probably a lot of those. But I'm going to pick one of the outcomes where UNLV wins by a field goal. 27-24. That's what I see. I think UNLV can play a lot better than they did. I think that the defense can replicate what they did in Vegas. Will they? Who knows? But I think they can. I think that the UNLV offense can play just a tiny bit better. Maybe Hodge doesn't throw a pick, and I think that the defense can play pretty well. I feel confident in that. No, I don't. I mean, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm hoping UNLV wins. I see a path for them to win. There is a path that they could win the game, and so I'm picking that path. 27-24. I think Hodge has a better game. I think he runs for 100 yards. And I don't think that Boise State really does anything wrong. I think it's just a close game that comes down to a field goal. That's kind of how I feel about it. And I'm just glad that we got a chance to play you guys again. Because certainly, we did already play. Boise State had every right to be like, we already played you guys. We don't have to play you again. We already went down and won. And so I want to thank Jay Norvell and the Colorado State Rams for being complete frauds and for sucking at everything and being mediocre. So thank you, Jay Norvell. And I appreciate that. I'm glad we get another chance. I do think that Boise State fans would have enjoyed winning by 15 scores against the Rams, especially after last year and that debacle of an Andy Avalos performance in Colorado Springs. Andy Avalos taking that team to what were they, like 5-5 is still one of my favorite botched coaching jobs of all time. And I'm grateful that Danielson has brought Boise State back to where they deserve to be. So that's how I feel. I did have a question from Reno Hater, and we'll close out on this. We were going a little longer. I knew we were going to go longer than I thought we were going to go. So it's about the Heisman. And UNLV fans don't get to get, I know Boise State fans talk about this all day, every day. But give me your thoughts on this question. Do you think Genty wins the Heisman? Obviously, I think a lot of people would agree that he deserves it, but do you think he actually will win it?
So am I predicting that he'll win it? I mean, I said, does he deserve to win it? 100%. When you look at what he's done, does he, am I predicting that he's going to win it? He is going to have a big game. versus UNLV, which is what I'm hoping happens. I'm not necessarily predicting he's going to have the level of game needed to win the Heisman. I think that he's going to have if I throw a number on it, I don't like to necessarily put out statistical predictions because those are just so variable. My main thing is the score predictions. But if I had to put a number on it, I think he'll have 170 plus yards rushing, somewhere in that number, and at least 2 touchdowns. To win the award right now, I think that you've got Deion Sanders saying that that it's locked up, that it's over. It's not. It's not over. But regardless of what Deion Sanders wants to believe, or the ACC commissioner wants to believe, conference championship games do matter. They matter to the committee when it comes to voting for the rankings overall for the playoffs, and I think that they matter to the Heisman voters as well. Now, it's not the end-all, be-all. You saw last year LSU's quarterback win it. They didn't go to their conference championship. They were 9-3, and same record as Colorado State. Sorry to Bucks fans. That was a big insult to Colorado. Same record as CU there. So it's not the end-all, be-all, but it is a factor, and the biggest factor is that Ashton, Hunter has done everything he can. He has put everything he can on the table. Ashton Jeanty gets one more chance. He gets one more case to be able to, one more chance to make his case for the Heisman. I think in order to win it, he needs to set himself up to break the record in their next game. I think they need to win the Mountain West Championship game so that they know they're going to the playoffs. And he needs to set himself up to break the record in the next game. Right now, he is under 400 yards off of the number one all-time.
334.
334, something like that. Yeah, like just under 350. He's averaging 190.1 yards per game. If he did that, he would break the record by like 60 points. I think he only needs, somebody said, like 170 yards in both of these next 2 games to break the record. I think if he can set himself up where he's within 100 yards of breaking that record, 150, something that he's going to achieve in the next matchup. So voters know that they're not just voting for a guy who had an incredible season, but a guy who had the best season, who is definitely going to finish the year with the best season in all of college football and going to the playoffs. And what that means for his team, I think he wins the Heisman. So I think he needs to have 200 plus yards rushing in this game to put himself again within 150 or less of breaking the Heisman record convincingly. And he needs to have at least 3 touchdowns. I think 4 or 5 touchdowns and 200 plus yards rushing would win him the award. I think 200 plus and 3 touchdowns would give him a good odds to going out and win. I know early voting's already started, so some people have already voted. You can't change their minds at this point. But I think a lot of people are going to wait to see what happens in this game, and the margins will be thin. But, I mean, how exciting is it overall, no matter what happens, that we have this opportunity to have a conversation about a group of 5 player and a running back actually be in conversation to go and win the Heisman. So, yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited about this game. I think your points are correct. That there is a path for UNLV to win. I mean, just because I'm predicting a 2-score win, it's not like I'm going to say they're going to go out there and win there by 30. It's still, what is that, like 14-point win, I think, is what I'm predicting. So I think that's going to be close. I think there is a path for UNLV to win. I think that path is turnovers and shutting down, keeping Ashton Jeanty under 150 yards. I think they do both of those things. They can win this game. And I would encourage people to check out the preview I did with Ron Counts. He's somewhat similar in the thought process to you. He's still predicting Boise State win, but a much closer one. You're kind of a field goal walk-off type of situation. So this is going to be a very good game. Just again, because I'm predicting 14 points. Not disrespect to UNLV. I know I have been disrespectful to UNLV unintentionally and intentionally on my channel in the past. I still don't think that they're a Power 4 expansion candidate. However, I will say, coming into this season, I thought UNLV was going to go 6-6. I'm completely wrong on that front. I thought UNLV was a flash in the pan. I thought that losing their starting quarterback, who had been the heart and soul of that offense, was going to dictate a sub 7-8 win season. They haven't. UNLV has earned my respect. Barry Odom specifically has earned my respect. He is an incredible coach. He's probably the best coach in the Mountain West right now, considering what he's working with and what he's done. I would put him ahead of Spencer Danielson. I think Spencer Danielson is an incredible head coach. He's done an incredible thing. But Barry Odom, he's kind of doing it not necessarily by himself, but obviously Spencer Danielson's got the benefit of Dirk Cutter and a lot of and Ashton Jeanty and everything else like that. Again, no disrespect, Spencer Danielson. Barry Odom is an incredible head coach. UNLV has proven that with the right coaching staff, and I never thought this was possible, with the right coaching staff and some of the right players, they can actually be a dominant, successful team. At this point, I do wish they were coming to the pack with us. I think they have established themselves as a program that is going to be competitive with the right hires going forward. I still have my doubts on, again, their marketability, their watchability, and the ability for Vegas to support that team. When it comes to competitive on-field play, UNLV has earned my respect. This is the most scared I've been all season about a game, as far as the impact, the results, what it's going to mean, and also the potential of the team that we are facing. So UNLV fans, UNLV team as a whole, you've done an incredible job this season. Both programs have had the best season in their school history in a long time. And we'll just have to see who ends their Cinderella story with that advance to the big game. So excited for this one. Thanks for having me on. It's been great.
Thank you, Miss. Thanks, man. Appreciate you. Hope Genty pulls it out. Regardless, I wish there was a scenario where he could win the Heisman and we could win the game. It's probably not going to happen, but a mediocre wide receiver and mediocre corner, or above average mediocre, it's not as good as by far and away the best running back in college football. So thank you so much for coming on, man. I appreciate you. Wish we were going to that Pac-12 with you. Wish that it was us, Memphis, and Tulane. I think that would be an unbelievable conference that could really start, pushing things forward, but we'll see what happens. You never know. Conference realignment changes things. Appreciate you, Rebel fans, for jumping on. Please check out his channel. I'll leave all the links in the description. You guys have a great night, and let's run.
Go Big Blue.
Let's run. I knew you were going to do that. I was like, he's going to do Go Big Blue at the end of this.